Kendrick Lamar is a rapper who has had an incredible impact on modern hip hop and is one of the most respected and celebrated artists of the 21st century so far. Kendrick has covered a lot of different topics across his career, but most of his music deals with contemporary social issues, largely around the African American community. In this video, I will show how Kendrick has incorporated images of Africa into his music and how his ideas of Pan-Africanism and black consciousness have developed over time. Kendrick's first studio album, Section 80, was released in July 2011 to largely positive reviews. However, as Pitchfork's Tom Breen commented at the time, Kendrick is still figuring out his voice. The album deals with a range of social issues in America, with songs about racism, medication, prostitution, and the crack epidemic. However, it is the lead single, High Power, where Kendrick brings in his ideas of black consciousness and Pan-Africanism. Kendrick frames the song through the lens of Malcolm X's more revolutionary politics as opposed to Martin Luther King. Kendrick also mentions several members of the Black Panthers, Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, and Fred Hampton, and each of the choruses claiming for each of them that you can't resist his high power. Through this, Kendrick is clearly aligning himself with the ideas of black consciousness that these figures represent, and to him, this idea is of solidarity through revolutionary activism. Kendrick also utilizes images of Africa to illustrate this point. There is a repeated motif for each verse where he says, "I'll be off the slave ship, building pyramids, writing my own hieroglyphs," which progresses to a suggestion and then a claim of accomplishment. This clearly reflects the ideas seen in Pan-Africanist ideology and movements such as the Harlem Renaissance, where Africa is looked to as a common ancestry for the black community, and utilizing images of African strength to promote unity. As also seen at the beginning of the song where he calls his message the Serengeti's clone. His reference to Marcus Garvey is also very interesting, Garvey being a very influential while controversial figure, which Kendrick seems to allude to when he says, "On the freeway to Africa till I wreck my Audi," which appears to criticise Garvey's ideas of black capitalism and the Back to Africa movement. In this song, Kendrick engages with ideas of black consciousness and Pan-Africanism through references to Africa and several influential figures. However, his discussion is not particularly fleshed out, especially in the images of Africa presented, as it is replicating ideas of ancient African greatness and the trope of Africa as the wild through the reference to the Serengeti. However, Kendrick developed his ideas massively on his 2015 album To Pimp a Butterfly. In 2014, Kendrick visited South Africa, and this trip, notably comparable to Malcolm X's trip to Africa, heavily influenced his next album and the ideas he presented in it. To Pimp a Butterfly has received widespread acclaim since its release, winning countless awards and inspiring a wave of scholarship. The album builds hugely on the content of his previous work by covering a huge range of social and personal issues such as African American culture, racial inequality, depression, and institutional discrimination, and incorporates jazz, funk, and soul musical influences. There are too many references to Africa and parallels with Pan-Africanism and black consciousness throughout the album to cover here, so I will just highlight the ones that I find most relevant. King Kunta shows both these aspects, with the name taken from Roots' Kunta Kinte and references to the Yams from Achebe's Things Fall Apart. James Bungert's article, I Got a Bone to Pick, Formal Ambivalence and Double Consciousness in Kendrick Lamar's King Kunta, explores the idea that Kendrick's position as a conscious rapper placed him directly in the framework of W.E.B. Du Bois's idea of double consciousness. Kendrick is at a crossroad of being a successful artist in the American music industry, which is conflicting with the politically oppositional message of his music, which Kendrick highlights on this song. The track Mama is the point on the album where Kendrick moves to explore the issues which his trip to South Africa highlighted for him. The second verse repeats the idea of him knowing everything about social issues in Compton, his home city, but then contrasted with his ending line, "Until I realized I didn't know shit, the day I came home." Home here meaning Africa, as it is followed by a conversation with a South African boy, which ends with him telling Kendrick to be an advocate, tell your homies especially to come back home. Here Kendrick is acknowledging his previously insular view and recognizing the issues black people face globally, using his experience of Africa to demonstrate this. J.G. Cantres, in his article Articulations of Displacement and Dissonance from Compton, Kendrick Lamar in the 21st Century, draws parallels between Kendrick's discussion of identity throughout the album and Paul Gilroy's argument that identity could be marshalled not for political ends, but rather for more authentic and powerful forms of self-knowledge and consciousness. Kendrick utilizes comparisons with Africa to demonstrate the complexity of these issues and his ideas of black consciousness. Complexion, a Zulu love, discusses beauty standards, especially colorism, and refers to the Zulu concept Ubuntu, which translates to humanness or human kindness. However, this very positive song is heavily contrasted with The Blacker the Berry, which discusses violence between African Americans. Kendrick compares conflicts between the Zulu and Xhosa tribes with those of street gangs in Compton. Cantres draws a similarity between Kendrick's argument here and Frantz Fanon's idea that it is not uncommon to see the colonized subject draw his knife at the slightest hostile or aggressive look from another colonized subject. The message regains its positivity on I, which is about self-love and identification, and notably discusses the use of the N-word in hip-hop, which is very controversial to some, as it is seen as degrading. However, Kendrick links it to the Ethiopian word for king, to reclaim it in a positive sense. These ideas culminate in the final song, Mortal Man, where Kendrick again compares himself to influential black figures like on High Power, Malcolm X, MLK, and notably this time, Nelson Mandela, but notably grapples with the ideas of the complexities involved in the ideas of black consciousness. The images of Africa presented here are considerably more developed and complex than on High Power, and support his much more fleshed out ideas of black consciousness and Pan-Africanism.